Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Common Good Data podcast, where we talk about how nonprofit and social sector leaders can use data and evaluation to drive impact, strengthen their communities, and of course, advance the common good. I am your host, Drew Reynolds, and today we're going to do something a little different, a little festive and fun. As we close out the year, I wanted to take some time to reflect on what I've been thinking about, what I've been learning, and what I'm kind of hoping to bring into my data and evaluation work with the clients that I serve into the coming year, 2026. And so I thought we'd put together an episode that is inspired by the classic, The 12 Days of Christmas. And this episode can be sort of a gift of reflections for nonprofit leaders out there and evaluators for you to think about as you're thinking about data and evaluation and how you can drive impact at the organization where you work. So we'll call this one the 12 evaluation reflections of the upcoming new year. So again, let's go ahead and start with our first one on the first reflection or evaluation. I'm not sure how well this metaphor is working, but we've got 12 of them. So here we go. First one, rediscovering your why. So it's always good to begin with the foundation, begin with mission, begin with the most essential things. I think a lot of times in evaluation, we have this temptation to drive straight to metrics, figure out what that cool thing is you're going to measure that's going to just, make your organization look so forward and innovative and data driven, right? And don't get me wrong, you want to do those things too. But it's always important to begin with mission and your why. At the end of the day, if what you're measuring doesn't really reflect who you are or the big change that you're trying to bring about in the world, you're not going to work towards it. And it's not going to be this meaningful thing, right? It's going to be like this thing that you kind of have to do that's just sort of there. So I want you to think about what is the most important change that your organization has made in the past year? And then as you think about that change and transformation, is that captured in some way in your evaluation process? And that could involve a really cool quantitative metric. It could involve more testimonial or storytelling or qualitative data. And so always be thinking a little bit about what is that big change story that you want to be telling and letting that drive the evaluation efforts that you're making. So second reflection of the new year, I guess we'll say, listening before going into measurement. So often we jump straight into measurements, but it's always good to begin that process of listening. It kind of works with the first reflection that focuses on your why and who you are and your mission. In that second one, sometimes listening to those you serve can help reinvigorate your imagination about what that mission really is all about, what your why really is. I've talked to so many nonprofit leaders who go back and get away from the spreadsheets and the board management and the funding and the grants, and they actually just go spend a day kind of doing the direct service work of their organization. And it's wow, this is why we do this. It feels so good and rejuvenating to do it and to be back into it again, And so it's always a good idea to spend that time listening and spending time in the direct service of your organization to reacquaint yourself with that mission, and then allow that perspective, that listening, observing, seeing what you see, community voice, and letting that really affect you and guide you in your thinking. Always a good place to begin before starting big evaluation projects. Reflection number 3, simplify to amplify. Okay, so simplify to amplify. Sometimes we have that phrase, less is more. That can so often be true with data. I've had so many different times with clients where we've looked and we've got 50 measures lined up as potential things we could measure for an organization. It's guys, we can't do this. This is just way too much work. It's cluttered. It doesn't have a simple message. And whoever you're talking to isn't going to look at all 50 or understand or remember those 50 anyways. And so it's always important to come back to basics. Again, it's not how much you measure, but rather what is the most important thing that you're measuring. And being able to have that clarity and focus really allows your organization to come off as one that is clear, focused, that really understands what its core mission is and what it's trying to accomplish, instead of just bombarding people with data. It also has the nice positive effect of not overwhelming your poor staff, who are probably spending lots of time entering in data into some type of spreadsheet or system that they have at your organization. And so if you can cut down on some of those things, again, simplify, it can make much more of an impact for your organization. Reflection 4, honoring stories as much as statistics. I came into this work, I think, bringing a quantitative skill. I love numbers and data. I kind of rediscovered math when I was going back to school in social work and was like, whoa, this would be so cool if I could find ways to use this in my skill set now. But as I've progressed in my career and I've worked more with organizations, I find time and time again that an organization that is able to tell a good story first, connect it to numbers and have those data there, but to have a broader narrative about who they are, what their mission is, and who they serve, and how that change process happens, it's much more impactful. And I say this with humility because I've always been a person that has been a bit more quant heavy. And so I have to say this with a little bit of humility to my storytelling folks, my qualitative folks, that really the stories are what drive, I think, people's engagement with your organization. So always make sure that as a part of your evaluation process that you have some way to gather testimonials, to engage in storytelling practices, to conduct focus groups or interviews. Do those types of things that help explain the how and the process, that provide that thick description that really helps to elucidate what your organization is, why it matters, and do so in a way that resonates with people's passions and interests. To, we have this phrase, tug on the heartstrings, which I always thought that's a weird phrase. Like, are there strings on I don't have strings on my heart. And even if, do I want you tugging them? I don't know. But in any case, we have that phrase, which means to draw on one's emotions. And I think that is an important thing to be thinking about when you're doing evaluation work, which can sometimes come off as a little dry and boring. So make sure that you bring that vitality into it. Reflection 5, prioritizing use over collection alone. And this kind of goes back to the one on simplify to amplify. There's a temptation to just simply collect data everywhere. Like, okay, we're doing a thing, run a survey. We're doing a thing, run another survey. Gather more data here, gather more data here. And you just have this giant web of data. Let's add another question. What if we knew about this? What if we knew about this? Oh, wouldn't this be nice to know? And oftentimes that results in really just data that kind of sits there, and we spend a lot of time collecting it, and we asked our clients or our folks to share that information, and just kind of sits there. And it's kind of a bummer. We don't really want your data and your information to be collected and then just not be used. So always be thinking about what is the audience that is going to most resonate with the type of data that we're collecting. And sometimes that means you need to have some really rigorous quantitative data. You can think of funders that are going to be looking for that. Government agencies are going to be looking for that, particularly your kind of federal agencies and whatnot. If you're doing research type grants, especially, you're going to want to be looking towards those. So you're going to want to be thinking a little bit about, like, what are those audiences and what are they going to want to know? On the other hand, if you're an organization that focuses a lot of its fundraising efforts on peer-to-peer fundraising or events, that's where those stories come in. And so it's thinking a little bit about how do you prioritize the data in such a way about how it's going to be used, rather than thinking about what are the complicated things I need to come up with to make this beautiful data collection process happen. Reflection 6, be a learner, not a prover. We had a great episode. I definitely recommend you checking it out on the Common Good Data podcast with Victor Amaya this fall. And Victor talked about how important it was. He had this phrase like, we're not coming to prove something, we're here to improve things. And really, if you're doing data and evaluation work well, that spirit and disposition of a learner, I think, is far more useful in the world of evaluation than being one of someone who's trying to prove something, or that somebody who's trying to rest all of their efforts on accountability. Don't get me wrong. You want to have evidence for the work that you do, and there always is going to be an accountability an accountability aspect to the work that you're doing. But if you let those things drive your evaluation, it becomes cold. It becomes kind of closed. It becomes sometimes, you feel like you're frozen in this space. A disposition of a learner opens it up an opportunity for curiosity, to be able to say, I wonder why that is. Why is it that we're finding success here, but not here? Why is it that someone said that in those focus groups? I never would have thought of that. That disposition of learning then opens up an opportunity for you as a leader and as an organization of your organization to be able to move away from defensiveness and move towards this openness and curiosity that is ultimately going to be the driver of innovation in your organization. Reflection 7, recentering equity in evaluation. Impact isn't just about what we measure, but it's also about who gets to say and how folks are represented, how power is shared in those dynamics. If one person is making decisions about what's important and what gets measured, it's going to reflect that person's perspective, their lived experience, and potentially their biases, right? So whenever you can in evaluation, there's an opportunity to open up and democratize your process and center equity in that evaluation process can be really, really helpful. For those of you who are looking for a deep dive into this, check out community-based participatory research. They have lots of different ways in that kind of that lens towards evaluation is going to look at research and evaluation from a perspective of bringing those diverse voices to the table. They'll even suggest having a whole team or an advisory council or something like that help guide the evaluation. And for those of you who really want to focus on equity, I recommend checking that out. Reflection 8, building relationships around data. Maybe I'll rephrase this for reflection 8. You're collecting data, you're putting reports together, you're building dashboards, and you can think so often about the tools. But the key here is that you want it to be a relationship and a dialogue with the audience that you're building towards, that you're creating these things for. So you create a dashboard to share with the community. What does that dialogue look like? And how is that community going to use that dashboard or tool to ultimately bring change in their community? How do you think about, when you're putting together a report back for a funder? What is your report back going to say that goes beyond just data and reporting, that goes beyond just the essentials, that goes beyond just the requirements, but really shows an appreciation and gratitude for the funder, or really shows that you're trying to show what they're interested in funding and supporting your work? Thinking about data points and evaluation as an opportunity for relationship building and for dialogue and conversation between you and your stakeholders is a critical thing. I always sometimes, I've learned early in my career, I kind of missed this a few times, and I confess, because I would be putting together these great reports or whatever like that, but kind of forgot who they were for, and they were sometimes a little off the mark. And if you've had that experience before, take some, especially in this past year, if you're thinking about what you've done that hasn't quite matched what you thought it would be, take some time to think about how you can integrate the thought about relationship and trust building into your reporting on data and evaluation work at your organization. Reflection number 9 on the 9th evaluation of the new year. I'm not sure if this whole analogy is working, but anyways, reflection 9, celebrate small wins. So evaluation ultimately is done so that you can learn something and change, right? You want to learn about what you've accomplished and bring about some type of change for the future with the hope of making your organization more innovative, more effective in its work, more rooted in its mission, serving more people, insert whatever outcome you're looking for. But change takes time, and evaluation and getting good at evaluation takes years. It takes years to be able to get really good at this and to really show the impact of your organization. It's not something that's going to be won overnight. But of course, every small win does matter. And I always try to, when I work with clients, to take a moment and say, hey, I know this was just one survey, or hey, I know this is just one set of focus groups, or hey, I know this was just your first annual report. And maybe it isn't perfect. Maybe it isn't everything you hoped it would be. Maybe there are ways it can be improved, but man, you've done the first one. We're here. We've gone this far. Next year's is going to be even better. And the year after that, it's going to get even better. And the year after that, it's going to get even better. And each time you make investment in those small things that kind of build the muscles and the memory and the processes for data and evaluation work to show your impact, you're building capacity that you're going to build on, a foundation for the future, so that each year you're getting better and better at the work. Reflection 10, invest in your team, in your team's capacity. Again, data is only going to be effective if your people who are collecting it and analyzing and sharing it and writing about it feel as though they're invested in, and that the time that they spend on that is valued and appreciated. So spend some time talking to your team about the skills that they want to develop. Make space for professional development opportunities. The cool thing about evaluation is that there's a ton of free stuff out there, including actually on my website. Go to commongooddata.com/courses, and you can find a free little course there that your staff can participate in. It's not, sometimes we think about training as overhead, as a nice to have expense, but it's really not. It's core infrastructure that, when you invest in your team and help them to be successful, they're more likely to be effective in their work, and they're going to appreciate you for it and reward you for it in the work that they do. Reflection 11, make room for creativity. and talked a little bit about this too. You have to have this kind of disposition of openness for creativity. But I wanted to think a little bit about how, there's very few people who look at a spreadsheet or at a piece of data and have this amazing insight for their organization in its own right. It's usually when you bring the data and a group of people talk about it and they see different things and they have different ideas. Or you have a set of focus groups and feedback, and that feedback is shared back with the team in a way that is really meaningful and understanding and helpful and guiding, their thoughts and ideas. So the key for your organization is that you want to make room for that. You've probably heard, if you've listened to this podcast before, how I think the one thing that you can do tomorrow to improve your work and your organization, no matter where you are, whether you're the leader or you're kind of in a management position or if you're direct staff, if you just go to the next meeting that you have and bring any data that you have and just say, hey, I wanted to talk about this. This is where our data are at, and what do you guys think? Are some of the best ways I think you can really drive new ideas, creativity, and innovation in an organization. And it's not the data itself that really does it. It's the thinking that you do with the data. It's the decision-making that comes after that fact. So building that data infrastructure is going to be really helpful to guide your decision-making, but ultimately it's going to be you with your lived experience, with the lived experience of the clients or residents you serve. All of those different pieces coming together are really going to be what kind of drives the innovation in your organization. And lastly, as we get to the end of the calendar year, reflection number 12, lead with hope. And the key about evaluation is believing ultimately that change in your organization is possible, that change is also possible for those you serve. And it can be hard. It's been a hard year for many of you in the social sector. You might be thinking about the stresses of funding cuts, a difficult environment that you're maybe working in. Maybe the nature of your work has changed in ways that you didn't expect. And I think that ultimately, evaluation comes from a position that says, we want to be hopeful about this future. We're going to be anticipating that more positive change is to come. And that data can be a way of helping you see and make sense of that change and continue that hope along the way. So I know it's been a challenging year, but I want to kind of take a minute to think a little bit about hope and how important it is to maintain that, oftentimes, even in moments of difficulty. And rooted in that hope, sometimes even these challenging moments or experiences that you may be having as an organization can be an opportunity for real growth and transformation for you. So that's my hope for you coming into the new year of 2026. So anyways, I hope you appreciated this fun holiday reflection for the Common Good Data podcast. Now, if any of these insights or ideas resonated with you, or if you're thinking about ways to strengthen your evaluation practice for the upcoming new year, I invite you to check out an online course at commongooddata.com/courses. We have the Clarity Impact Funding Framework course that's up there. That will go through that framework process that I think is really helpful for organizations as they're trying to think about how to improve their impact. So I encourage you to check out that online course. So in conclusion, wishing you some rest and restoration over the holidays. Do take some time to have a little bit of a break, and then hope that you can rejoin again with renewed purpose as we move into the new year. So thank you so much, and see you next time on the Common Good Data podcast.